recitation for chapter 22, inflation, and I will concentrate on how to measure inflation in this recitation, and you can read the other topics in book or the slides. So inflation happens when average prices in economy goes up. To measure this average price, we use price index. And to measure this price index, we select basket of some specific goods. And this goods changes according to which price index we use. There are various types of price indices, and some of them are CPI, PPI, or GDP deflator. We have seen the GDP deflator in chapter 19, and GDP deflator refers to all produced goods price change, where CPI, consumer price index, focuses on the goods that consumers use, such as food, clothing, or rents. And PPI, producer price index, focuses on the goods that producers use, such as inputs, prices of inputs. So we can use different price indices, and it can change. What changes is the basket of goods. And after we find the price indices, we will compare their prices using the index. So after you find the price indices, a calculation of inflation rate is quite easy. You just have to write the price index of selected year minus the price index of previous year divided by the price index of previous year times 100. This equation will give you the inflation rate of the selected year. So the most difficult problem that can arise here is the how to measure price index. Well, price index, to measure price index, you have to pick a base year first. And let's see this example. We see that different prices in the year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. These prices refer to the price of a specific basket of some specific goods. So this basket of goods cost $205 in year 1, and for example it cost $240 in year 3. So let's pick our base year as year 2, and you can pick any year as your base year. So I picked my base year as year 2. To find the consumer price index in year 2, we will divide selected year, which is year 3, 240, and we will divide it by the price of base year, which is 225. And after that, we will just have to multiply it by 100. And let's calculate the consumer price index, or price index shortly. Price index for year 2, the base year, we will write the selected year, which is 225, and we will divide it by the price of base year, which is again 225 times 100. This will give us 100. So I mentioned it again in chapter 19. The price index of the base year always 100, and you can see why by this formula. After you calculate the price index for every year, you can use this formula to calculate the inflation rates. And remember, to calculate these prices, some specific goods have more weights. For example, when calculating consumer price index, rise in food prices are more important than to rise in price of socks. So we will put more weight on the price of foods, and we will see how to put weights on some specific goods in the upcoming questions. In question 1, it says, in Meta bookstore, prices of textbooks are as follows, and we are given a table here. It shows the prices of engineering, politics, and economic textbooks. An average student purchases 3 engineering, 2 politics, and 4 economics textbooks a year. And these are the weights. Why? Because the change in price of economic textbooks affects students more than the change of price in politics, because an average student purchases more economics books than politics books. So we will put more weight on the prices of economics when economic textbooks when calculating the price of baskets. So we will put most weight on economics textbooks, then engineering textbooks, and last the politics textbooks. In the first question, it says using 2013 as base year, create price index for the books. First, to find the price in this index, we have to find the price of baskets of the years. So let's find the price of basket in 2012. We will multiply. These are the weights. As you can see, we put 3 weights on the engineering books. We put 2 weights on the politics books, and we put 4 weights on the economics books. And these weights will be given to you in the questions. So in 2012, we just multiply 3 with 100 price of engineering book, 2 with the price of politics textbooks, and 4 with the price of economics textbooks. And we will do these for every year, and they will give us these prices. And we know that our base year is 2012. This is given in question, and I will use this to find the price in the indices. So price index of 2012 is basically, we will divide the selected year, this number, with the price of the base year, which is this number. And then we will multiply it by 100. What's the price index in 2012? Well, we know this is the base year, and the price index of base year always 100. So this will be 100, and you can do it by calculation. This will give you the same number. And the price index is 2014. Is we have to divide the selected year's price by the base year's price. Then we will multiply it by 100. And these equations will give you the price indices of the different years. In part B, it asks us to find what is the percentage change in price index from 2012 to 2014. We calculated the price indices for the years, and this calculation here yields this number, and this calculation here yields this number. So we will use basic algebra to show the percentage change in the price indices of these years. First, we will write the price index of 2014, which is this number. We will subtract it with the price index of 2012, which is again this number. And we will divide again by the price index of 2012, and we will multiply it by 100, which will give us 17.9%. This is the percentage change in price index from 2012 to 2014. In question 2, we are given a table showing us the GDP deflator and consumer price index for different years. It says calculate inflation rate based on GDP deflator and based on CPI, consumer price index. What's the difference between using GDP deflator and CPI? Well, the only difference is, while consumer price index focuses on the goods that consumers use, like clothing, housing, etc., GDP deflator calculates the change in price in overall economy, all produced goods. So you can calculate inflation in either way, but if you want to calculate inflation experienced by consumers, it is more reasonable to use consumer price index. But if you want to calculate inflation experienced by overall economy, you can use GDP deflator. So it makes no difference to calculate either of them. Let's remember the equation for finding inflation rate. We have to write our price index of selected year, and we will subtract it by price index of previous year, and we will divide it by the price index of previous year times 100. But as you can see, We don't know the price index of 2010, so we cannot calculate the inflation rate in 2011 because the previous year of 2011 is 2010, but we cannot write the price index of 2010. We don't know it. So we cannot calculate the inflation rate on 2011. But we can calculate the inflation rate in other years. For example, let's calculate the inflation rate in 2012. We will, let's use GDP deflator for calculating inflation rates. We will write the price index of the selected year, this number, minus the GDP deflator or price index of the previous year, and we will divide it by the price index of previous year times 100. I wrote GDP deflator here because we use the price index as calculated by GDP deflator. Let's calculate the inflation rate in 2013. Again, we will write the price index of selected year, this number, minus the price index of previous year divided by the price index of previous year times 100. Again, this is based on GDP deflator. So let's calculate the inflation rate in 2012 based on consumer price index this time. We will write the price index of selected year minus price index of previous year divided by the price index of previous year again times 100. And this is based on CPI. Let's calculate the inflation rate based on CPI in 2013. We will write the price index in selected year, minus the price index of previous year divided by price index of previous year. You can calculate the inflation rate by calculators. Question 3 is a verbal question. It says you have a mortgage with fixed 6% interest rate that you took 5 years ago, and this interest rate is not annually, it's for 5 years. Over the years, the inflation rate has crept up unexpectedly to its present level of 7%. Is this good or bad for you, just considering your mortgage? So let's suppose that you took 100 liras in your bank in 2010 and you have to pay 106 liras because there's a 6% interest rate in 2015. But this is in nominal terms. When considering if we are good or bad, we have to calculate the purchasing power of money. In 2010, we took 100 liras. But in 2015, to buy the same amount of goods with 100 lira, that 100 lira bought in 2010, we have to have 107 liras in 2015 because the inflation rate is 7%. So 107 liras buys the same amount of goods that 100 lira bought in 2010. So 100 lira in 2010 worth actually 107 liras in 2015, but we paid 106 liras to bank. So we are in a good situation because the inflation rate is bigger than the interest rate. So when calculating this kind of situation, we use the real interest rate to calculate if we are good or bad. Real interest rate is approximately the interest rate, nominal interest rate, minus the inflation rate. So if the real interest rate is too high, you are in a bad situation as a borrower. So let's calculate the real interest rate that we bought in our mortgage. So the real interest rate in our debt, real interest rate, nominal interest rate is 6% minus 7%. The inflation rate is -1. So actually we paid negative interest to our debt. So this is good for us, the borrowers, and this is bad for the banks, the lenders. When considering if you're in a good situation or bad situation, don't just consider the nominal terms, but consider real interest rates, and it is actually calculated by this. But we don't know the inflation rate in upcoming years, so you cannot know the real interest rate if you took a 5-year mortgage. So when you go to a bank and make a 5-year debt, you cannot know the real interest rate. You have to just guess, because no one knows the inflation rate that will occur in 5 years.